Testing, testing, testing. I know the author of that book.
Most people believe the Bible is true.
Has science proven the Bible wrong?
Is creation and evolution a side issue?
Our ancestors understood origins by extrapolating from their own experience. How else could they have done it? Then science came along and taught us that we are not the measure of all
The
things.
simplest explanation is, there is no God. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate.
You and I are the product of billions
We share a common
years,
ancestor
billions of years.
with chimpanzees.
This animal eventually became human.
I'm sorry, but if you don't understand that humans and monkeys came from a common ancestor...
Single out evolution and act as if there's some kind of major scientific dispute, and in fact...
Evolution is a fact, not a theory.
Evolution is a fact. I mean,
That's right.
There's no question.
Evolution isn't an opinion, it's fact.
Evolution is scientific fact.
I'm sorry, I believe in evolution.
Lived in the ocean 200 million years ago.
8 million years ago,
We emerged from microbes and muck.
Hi, good afternoon. Hopefully we can get to our seats and we'll get started soon. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Robert Carter, who's a senior scientist and speaker at CMI USA in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's currently researching human genetics and other issues related to biblical creation. He's well published and he's a great speaker. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it tonight. He obtained his BS in applied biology from Georgia in '92, and then afterwards he was teaching for a while in high school, and he got his PhD in marine biology. So we talked a little bit about some of those kind of topics earlier, and real interesting stuff. He converted to Christ at an early age. And did not know what to do with the theory of evolution and how science and religion kind of fit together. But what you're going to see is how he really was able to get that to work well. He's also published numerous papers and articles, and we'll hear some really good stuff tonight. A couple logistical things. We've got the youth in the back with all kinds of good snacks and drinks and everything else, right? So if you guys want to give them a little shout out over there and go get some stuff as you want to do it. The second thing, logistically, is that we're going to be passing some clipboards around. And then we got some of the guys out here already. If you could fill out the front sheet, that would help us out. And then during the second part, we'll go ahead and send them back out. And then you can fill out another sheet if you want the magazine versus the mailing list, those kind of things. We also have several sponsors that have really, really helped us out. And without, saying too much, there's also an offering box outside that will go towards CMI if you'd like to donate. And there's also books out there as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to Dr. Robert Carter.
Good evening, everybody. We have a special treat for you this weekend. We have 5 completely different talks between tomorrow and this evening. This first one, though, is probably going to be the strangest thing you've ever heard presented at a church before. On purpose. I want to describe the nature of reality and what the best science knows about what we're made of and how the universe works. But in so doing, we're going to realize that we are made of almost nothing. That our precious little atoms are actually almost worthless. Now, I'm not doing that to, ruin your self-esteem. Instead, every time we take humanity and bring it down a few notches, all that does is elevate God. So the purpose here is to show how incredible God is, and the fact that he would love us anyway even makes his love even more incredible. Okay. Now, I am a marine biologist by training. I spent years scuba diving in Florida and Belize, the Bahamas. It was a tough life. And I'm studying that green color. You see that green color? Let me turn on my little laser pointer here. That green color, that a lot of corals have these beautiful greens and blues and whites and yellows and reds. And I'm in the laboratory when I realized that those colors are made by proteins. And once I knew there was a protein there, I left the world of coral reef science behind. And I got into the world of genetics, genetic engineering, actually. And I got my PhD after stealing the greens and reds from these animals and engineering them into those animals. So the green fishes existed, but we made the first red fish ever seen in the world. And that opens up a giant can of worms. Is that moral? How far can we go in science before we break one of God's laws? Those are good questions. Part of that we're going to hit today. I want to impress upon you 3 big ideas, like a 3-point sermon, my 3 big ideas. 1, science depends upon philosophy. The scientists don't want you to know that, but absolutely depends upon philosophy. 2nd, there are more things that we don't know than we do know. And probably half of what we think is true isn't. We just haven't figured out what's not true yet. And that's the history of science. Most things people have ever believed scientifically weren't correct. I also want to impress upon you that it is reasonable to trust the Bible specifically especially because science is such a fickle beast. Let me ask you a question. How do you know what you know? Think of something you think is true. Your birthday, your mother's name, what you had for breakfast. Doesn't matter. Think of something you think is true. How do you know it's true? Somebody else told you. How do you know you're awake right now? You don't. How do you know the universe wasn't created yesterday and aliens filled your brain with false memories? You don't. How do you know that you're not living in the Matrix? You don't. However, we use our brains. We put two together. When things don't match, when there's a discrepancy, there's a problem there. But if your mother was never called anything other than her name your entire life, and you remember your life, and you've seen maybe her birth certificate, or maybe talked to your grandmother, you got a pretty good idea that that is a factually true statement. But at first, you just trusted what you heard, and later on, you might have had to validate it. The problem is when we're learning, when we're in school specifically, there's so much to know. And it's like drinking from a fire hose. And the thing is that in that stream of water, there's false information. Some of it by accident, because the professor just doesn't know. Some of it, everyone in the world believes, and it's not true. And some of it is actually misinformation. And you as a student, you don't have time to go and figure it all out. You've just got to accept it as true. That means that you are on a defensive position. And the guy, like at the podium, by the way, my favorite verse is, not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brethren, for know that you should be judged more strictly. It terrifies me to be up in front of an audience telling them things, because I'm held to a double standard. I don't think most professors acknowledge that. But there's definitely some misinformation in the stream, and there are people in this world who speak very confidently. Oh man, I wish I had that confidence. And they're speaking nonsense. And we don't have the authority to challenge them, and we don't have the enough knowledge to challenge them. Could you walk up to some famous scientist and say, hey, Mr. Scientist, you're wrong about evolution because of... And do you think you could say anything they've never heard before? Probably not. And it's hard. Oh man, this is so frustrating. Here's the worst thing of everything. When I asked you how you know what you know, the modern world is the worst ever in human history. Because we think we have all the information at our fingertips. Oh no, we don't. Because you go on any major platform and they're going to curate the information and spoon feed you what they think you want to hear. You are in an echo chamber. That is the nature of social media. It's human nature. I like things I like, and I don't things I don't like. And even scrolling down any one of these media sites, they know how long you have watched the page. Even if you don't click on it, they're measuring your scroll rate. And all of a sudden, I'm getting all these papers on ecology. The little advertisement or something. It's like, I never clicked on it. Oh, okay, butterflies in Costa Rica, and very interesting. And they know that, and they keep feeding me more and more. So, how do you know what you know if you don't know everything, if some of the things you think you know aren't true, and you're not given all the information? Now, apply that to science at large, and that's the position that we're in. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now, we see through a glass, darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. Clearly, we don't have all the information. And we're talking about science. Can science even test God's existence? No. And so, if that's true, there might be an entire unexplored, non-scientific realm that science can't even touch. And every once in a while, God might come and visit us and give us a glimpse of something. I don't know what your Christian experience is. I don't even know if you're a Christian. But most people who are Christians will tell you that they've had some sort of an experience with God. There's tons of them in the Bible. But that's not a scientific prospect. The reason I'm a Christian is because I think God reached out and touched me when I was 19 years old and literally woke me up. I cannot defend that in a classroom, a courtroom, or a scientific study. It's just true. But you can't know it's true. I might be lying. You might tell me your Christian experience. I can't tell you if it's true or not. That's yours. This is why science cannot even touch religion. And yet, according to Scripture, according to the Bible, we know that most religions are false. So which one's true? Oh, man. Are you frustrated yet? I only been talking for 5 minutes. New Scientist magazine had this on our cover a couple years ago. The big question, why? And they list all the questions that keep scientists up at night. Why do we exist? Why do we grieve? If we're just stardust rearranged randomly for 70 years maybe, why do we grieve? Why do we care about anything? Why are we irrational? Why is there a cosmic speed limit? And why does evolution happen? Nice assumption there. Why are we conscious? How does a scientist even pursue science when they don't even know why science exists, why their mind exists, or how they're even able to think? If you think about it this way, if we are evolved beings, all the genes that we carry were genes that helped our ancestors have babies, not fly to outer space. Those genes are there so the males can fight over the females and who gets the bananas. And the ones who successfully survive those two things and avoid the snakes, I guess, 3 things maybe, they're the ones who had all the babies. That type of a scenario does not breed rocket scientists. In fact, the entire educational establishment might be a complete colossal waste of time because highly educated people tend to have fewer children. Ooh, they're being naturally selected against. Oh, crazy. I wrote an article in Creation Magazine a couple years ago. It's my favorite thing probably I've ever written. It's called We Are Less Than Dust. What I did was I tried to explain what the human body is made of. Now, we're made of molecules, right? Molecules are made of atoms. Okay, but how do you conceive of an atom? I needed a way to, how big is an atom? How far are things inside? So what I did is let's take an atom and make it as large as, let's take the nucleus of an atom and make it as large as the sun. Okay? Now we have a solar system model of an atom. Now that atom, that nucleus, has electrons. How far away is the closest electron? If the nucleus is as large as the sun? And the answer is 13 times further away than Pluto is from the sun. That's the first electron. And in between is nothing. And electrons essentially have no size. So if you had a molecule, here's your sun-sized nucleus right here. Actually, I have to make it here, right there. There's your sun-sized nucleus. No. There's your sun-sized nucleus. Here's an electron shared between that nucleus and this nucleus. You probably can't even see the other nucleus. Even if it was bright and shining like the sun, it would look like a star. It would be a pinpoint of light. It would be so far away. And in between is nothing. That's what you're made of. 99.9999% empty space. How does that make you feel? Why can you see me if I'm made of empty space? Why is this floor holding me up if it's really nothing there? Well, the answer is that because of these shared electrons, these nuclei are kind of stuck together. And those electrons happen to reflect light. So I am literally a hologram. I am an electromagnetic force field that's reflecting these things called photons. By the way, we don't even know what a photon is. We don't know what gravity is. We don't know what electromagnetism is. We don't know what light is. We don't know what magnetism is. These are fundamental forces that we've described. We use them all the time. I've got a hard wire here. Usually I'm using a radio signal. Radio signal back to the back room there. And it's somehow connected to something up to the projectors, and there's photons coming at these projectors. We don't know what these things are. These are the most fundamental things in the universe. So the universe is weird. We are emptiness. What does that mean for how we're supposed to think? Look at Genesis 3:19. For you are dust, God said to Adam, and to dust you shall return. And yet God loved the dust. And Christ came to this earth to die for the dust. All this does is magnify the love of Christ for his bride. It is more shocking because I'm worth less than I thought. How much am I worth? You take my body and boil it down. I got water. Okay, water can be expensive. Bottles of water, fine. But take the water away. I got carbon, I got boron, I got selenium, I got zinc, I got magnesium, hydrogen, calcium. I'm worth about $13 on the open market. And yet God loved me anyway. There's a lot of salvation, gospel-related information in this whole creation message. I tell all my other speakers that, look, we're not doing this for the sake of science. We're doing this for the sake of Christ. I don't care about science, honestly. It's like Paul. I want to know. All Paul wanted to know was Christ. And the older I get, that becomes more true. When I started out doing this on a speaking circuit for CMI, by the way, we're going to speak at about 1,300 churches and schools and events around the world this year. There's about 30 people like me on the speaking circuit. We're really busy. And yet, the reason we're doing this is because this gives us a bully pulpit to talk about Jesus. Not about science. Who cares? I want to talk to people about heaven and how to get there. And that surprises people, but the entire scientific thing is not neutral. Science is not neutral because people are not neutral. And all people have some sort of a religious conviction of something. And even if they don't think about anything or don't think any religious exists, that's a religious proposition. So we're all religious, we're all sanctimonial, we're all biased and bigoted, and we're all just a pile of dust with billions of miles between our sun-sized nuclei if we want to make our molecules bigger than that. You having fun yet? Hey, if you like science, we put out a newsletter every Friday. We call Info Bites. It's some new article, maybe a new resource, maybe an interview with a former evolutionist. There's no telling what might appear in the pages of our newsletter. If you like to sign up for that and kind of plug into the pipeline that CMI is constantly making new information, it's really easy. We're going to hand out a sign-up form. If you got a phone, you can click on the QR code, or you can just write down your name, your email address, and a zip code. It's really easy. All right, guys, you can do that now. And while I'm speaking, I'm just going to keep on going. When you see it, you're all going to pass them around, I assume, so it'll get there. They're coming soon, I'm sure. You already did it. Thank you. It's like, why is nobody moving? All right, that out of the way. Let me ask you a question. What is evolution? A theory, but a theory of what? If you had to define what evolution is, what's the definition of evolution? Is it just change over time like every textbook says? That's what the word means. To evolve basically means to unfold, to be discovered over time. But it can't be just change over time, because I believe that God engineered his creation to change over time, to adapt, to change according to circumstances. And if I believe in change over time, I'm not an evolutionist. That cannot be the definition. In fact, if you want to define evolution, you have to use the phrase common ancestry. It's a belief that enough change over enough time in the right direction can lead to an explanation of the common ancestry of all things. But that's a long definition. So they usually shorten it to just change over time. I've had a lot of people, especially online, jump on me when I say something about change over time. They say, oh, you're an evolutionist. No, I am a theist. I believe in God. You can be a theist and evolutionist. Sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way. I happen to be what you would call, I don't know, if you want to put me in a box, you call me a young earth creationist, call me a biblical creationist. I don't know what phrase I like the best, but I believe that God created all things not as they are today, but all things, and because of his creative brilliance, things have adapted over time. Basically, all the evidence that Charles Darwin wrote in The Origin of Species fits in the creation model. Until he said, I see no limit to the amount of change after like 150 pages. And that's the key. It's not the change, it's the limits to change. And if you look at any complex thing, here, I got a computer right here. Let's change it. How would you like to change it? Would you like to switch around the keys, rip off the screen, add a new card? How about let's go into the operating system and just start making random changes to the operating system? How long do you think it'll last before it crashes? And once it crashes, will I ever get it back again? Yes, you can change things. I could change the font. I could change the letters on the keyboard. I could add a new peripheral. But there's a certain amount of change that will never happen. So I'm stealing Darwin's thunder and saying, thank you, Mr. Darwin, what else you got? Because you just said creation. See, earlier I said that science depends upon philosophy. Here's where that comes in. When you talk about evolution, you have to add a philosophy to it. See, I'm a biologist. A biologist is someone who studies living things. Okay, biology is a study of living things. To get evolution, you take biology and you have to add a cloak of a philosophy called naturalism. Naturalism is a belief. An ism is a belief. Naturalism is a belief that nature's all there is. It's a belief that you could use natural processes to explain everything that's ever happened in the history of the universe. Wow, that's an assumption. It's a belief that cuts God out of the equation from the beginning. Because if God is true, naturalism is not. Because God can do what he wants. He could go and created the universe. Or he could create it over 6 days. Or he could have interfered in miraculous events from time to time. If that's so, naturalism doesn't work. You see, I said earlier, I'm a theist. I believe in God. If you take biology and add the philosophy of theism to it, you will get some form of creation. You might get some old earth form of creation, day age or theistic evolution, or you might get biblical, what I would call biblical creation, just a straightforward reading of the book of Genesis. God created things over a couple of days in different packages. The plants he created on one day, all the fish and the flying things he created another day, all the land animals and humans he created on another day. Okay. But do you see how the philosophy comes in? You have to assume a lot about history, things you actually can't know. Now ignore the television here, this is a little video we put together. That molecule is a letter in DNA. When you string them together with phosphates, you get DNA. Let's take that DNA and turn it into a protein. The most fundamental thing that happens in every cell, protein manufacturing. Well, we use one of these little things. That's called a polymerase. It's zipping along the strand. We're way oversimplifying this, by the way. And letters of DNA are coming in, A, C, G, and T, and they're lining up on their corresponding layer on one strand only. There's like 50 enzymes involved in this. We're only showing one. And then what's called messenger RNA comes out the other end of the polymerase. When you get to the end of the gene, you have what's called the messenger RNA. Now, in bacteria, nice and straight. For you, these things are rearranged like crazy. But we have to take that turn to protein. We use these things. These are called transfer RNAs. At the bottom, there's a 3-letter code that lines up the 3 letters of your messenger RNA inside this machine called the ribosome. That's what it looks like. That's about how fast it works in reality. That ribosome will take the 3-letter codes, find the correct one, no one's sure how, and lines it up on the RNA, and then on the top is an amino acid, which is the building block of a protein. That red strand is a protein. But most proteins, if left to themselves, will fold incorrectly. They need help. So there's other proteins called chaperones come in, they glom onto that unfolded protein, and they don't let it fold, or it will be messed up. And they escort it, these chaperones chaperone the unfolded protein to this other molecule. It's a multi-protein thing called a chaperonin. Looks like a watermelon. We don't know how it works. We know that the unfolded protein goes on one end, it closes up, it folds it. If it folds incorrectly, it'll get chopped up. If it works, the folded protein pops out the other end. By the way, what you're seeing here is multiple Nobel Prizes, PhD dissertations, and billions of research dollars spent to figure this out over 100 years. And we have this 3-dimensional thing we call a protein. It's actually a 4-dimensional thing because most proteins aren't static. They work by moving. Something wiggles, something opens up, something closes. That means it changes over time, and time is the fourth dimension. A protein is a four-dimensional object that started from a one-dimensional string. A protein is a 20 to 21 letter object which started from a four-letter string. So we went from a four-letter code to a 20-plus letter code. And if that doesn't work, you can't get living things. There's a massive chicken and egg problem. Every origin of life scenario has a massive problem. In fact, many of them. And the biggest one is, where does the information come from? Where does a functional protein come from? A random protein does nothing. And even if, you had all these proteins that were forming in the world, which we don't even know how that would happen. Let's just say we have something in the world where proteins can form randomly. Yeah, you might get one of those after 1 billion years or so. But the cell needs thousands of those all together at the right time. So just the fact that one of these things might form, which they can't, but even if they could, does nothing. Origin of life can't get off the ground. So considering just proteins, they're crazy, amazing. Psalm 92:4. For you, O Lord, have made me glad by your work. At the works of your hands, I sing for joy. Have you ever stood up in the middle of biology class and started singing for joy? No, seriously. Ever? Probably because you're overwhelmed by the amount of information. But to study biology is to study the mind of God who created it. Now consider, if you were given a second, just an instant, to glimpse into the mind of God, do you think you would understand what you see? Consider that biology comes from the mind of God. Oh, that's why it's complicated. It reflects the nature of the Creator. If biology were really simple, it would be amazing. Okay, it would be in glory to God, yeah. But the more complex we understand life to be, the more God is magnified. And the only thing we learn about modern biology is that it's hyper complex. And I got my doctorate, not in coral reef ecology. Nope. Not even in Caribbean corals. Nope. Not even in the genus of coral. Nope. I got my doctorate in one particular protein of one particular species, a couple of species, of some corals that lived on the Caribbean. I know this much about almost nothing. And that's what science is like today. I like to be a generalist. I like to learn all sorts of different things. But to advance the ball is being advanced in little teeny increments. In 1800s, man, you could do something, make this gigantic, learn this brand new law of science that no one ever learned before. Those things aren't happening anymore. We're doing little things. It's a lot of work for a little bit more knowledge. But we're talking about science, though. I'm going to explain this again tomorrow morning, but just for here, I'll spend more time tomorrow morning. We have to understand what science is. Can you define science? I kind of understand what it is, but I don't know. Let me give you two different definitions, though. This will help a lot. One type of science is called operational science. This is what you started learning in 7th or 6th or 8th grade or somewhere in there. You took a little experiment, you made a little hypothesis, you ran a little thing, you either right or wrong, you revised your hypothesis. That's called operational science. You're dealing with observable, testable, and repeatable events in the present day. That type of science has led to the development of all of our modern technologies, including nuclear-powered rovers that NASA drives around Mars. And this type of science has nothing to do with evolution. It's just figuring out how things work. But this is not where the creation and evolution debate lies. No, we're actually arguing over theories of history. Evolution is a historical science. Creation is a historical science. It's about something that happened in the past. But history is not observable unless you were there, and none of you were alive at creation. History is not repeatable. It happens once. It's not testable. We don't have time machines. So we're not arguing over the boiling point of water. We're arguing over, did some stumpy-legged fish crawl out of an ocean hundreds of millions of years ago on its way to evolve into people? We're arguing over, how old is the universe? That's my second talk tonight. Those are things that we cannot actually know. We can make educated guesses sometimes, but man, this whole science, this is where the most difficult parts of science are because it's solely dependent upon philosophy. And yet, this operational science, the foundation of all modern science, was pioneered by Christians. You ever struggle in biology class? You remember chemistry? Ugh, I love chemistry. But you remember chemistry? Remember physics? Another formula. Okay, look at those formulas. You've seen them. Take out the Greek letters. You're left with regular letters, which are the initials of people's names. The initials of a Christian's name. Every single one of those fundamental constants that you learned about in school is named after someone who believed the Bible. I believe without exception. What? How is that true? Well, these early scientists, early modern scientists, they're saying, they literally started from the theologian perspective. They said, well, there's a creator God who's all-powerful, all-knowing. He never changes his mind on a whim. He's the ultimate lawgiver. He never does anything against his own nature. That kind of a God would have created a universe that operates according to law. And boom, the explosion of modern science came from that thought. That's why we did not get modern science in ancient Greece, because their gods were fickle. You couldn't run an experiment in ancient Greece. What if Zeus didn't like you? What if your lab rats, half of them died one night? Is that my cancer treatment or is that Hera? I don't know. You can't trust anything. We had to get rid of the paganism before science could work. But I know most scientists today are not Christians. And one reason for that is something that happened. In the 1600s, 1700s, we went through a period we call the Enlightenment. So think about that. These people said, we are enlightened. Everyone before us says the opposite of enlightened. In the dark. That's where the phrase dark ages came from. We call it the medieval period today. There were no dark ages. This is when they invented eyeglasses and windmills, which are amazing technology, and universities. The universities these men were using at their university pulpits to preach there was no God and preach naturalism, preach materialism, uniformitarianism, ism. These are belief structures. They moved us away from theism and brought us to a supposedly rationalistic universe that did not require a clockmaker, just the clock. Let me tell you something that's true. The universe was created. But something else interesting that comes out of that is the universe is, permit me to use the word, naturalistic, in that it operates like a clock. There are laws, there are rules. And so when I'm running an experiment, I put something on a scale, I don't think God reaches down and puts his finger on the scale to tell me how much it weighs. No. The thing weighs according to the laws of physics and chemistry and probability and whatever else God wove into the universe thousands of years ago. And it's constant because my God is constant. So the universe is naturalistic. And the naturalists, they had a good run of it. They had like 200 years where they thought they could explain everything. And what's happened over the last couple of decades? They've run into what I call the hard wall of biological complexity. The simpler life is, the more possible it is that evolution can explain it. The more complex life is, the less possible it is that evolution can explain it. If evolution was true, it might be able to do some simple things. Okay. But life is utterly complex. It completely argues in the face of naturalism and evolution. Things like that will not come from a warm little pond. Random stuff doesn't produce elegant structures and complex structures and mutually dependent processes. So yeah, the universe is naturalistic, but naturalism is terrible at explaining origins. Look at Hebrews 11:3. By faith we understand the universe is created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. Is that talking about naturalism? The universe didn't make itself. The things in the universe didn't get made by other things in the universe. No, the universe came about by the word of God. And notice, that is a faith proposition. You have to make a choice. I'm sorry, if you're not a Christian, you have to make a choice. Did God create the universe or not? And I tell you what, if you want to say that you don't think that God created the universe, you believe in bigger miracles than me. That is a massive faith commitment, and people don't like to hear that. But it is true. You got to believe in the most absolutely ridiculously improbable series of events. I don't. I have a sufficient cause. I have an all-powerful God who is outside of this universe and not dependent upon the universe, who could have created the universe. So intellectually, God makes more sense. Let me approach science again. Still trying to struggle what science is. Imagine that science is just a way of thinking. Maybe it's like an interpretive filter. You say, okay, I think these things are true. Now let's look at the world and see if the world fits what I think. So imagine your way of thinking is these gray lines. And imagine that the real world is the red lines. Can you see that if your thinking is wonky, you still might get some things right? That is science. We're wrong about a lot, but some things are true. That's evolution. Evolution absolutely makes some predictions that actually work out in biology. Yeah, that's true. But it doesn't mean it's true. It just means it gets a couple of things right. Now, I'm not going to say that my thinking, like on the right here, is perfectly aligned with reality. No, I would never say that. But can you see that the more closely you align your way of thinking with reality, the more you'll get right? Does that make sense? Well, I think that evolution was a left turn. Several hundred years ago, when naturalism came in, by the way, evolution isn't the problem. Naturalism is the problem. Naturalism is the mother of everything else. We wouldn't have deep time in billions of years were it not for naturalism, and we wouldn't have evolution were it not for deep time. I wrote an article on creation.com called Time the Great Enabler. Cool article. And if it wasn't for deep time, there would have been no Darwin. But deep time itself depends upon a philosophy, again, naturalism. You okay? Your head's hurt? Well, I've been going for 30 minutes now. I got 30 more. Can you handle 30 more? Now I'll go light on you. Let me ask you a question though, another question. What's natural selection? Is natural selection the same thing as evolution? The evolutionists want you to think it is. Darwin wants you to think it is. But let me clear up something here. Natural selection is not magic. Nature is not alive. Nature's not thinking. But in English, we don't have any other way to say, easily, something happens according to laws of probability and statistics, all by itself with no outside interference. Instead of that, we invoke the name of a Latin goddess named nature, because it's just easier to say it that way. But nobody believes that nature's doing anything, and Charles Darwin certainly didn't believe that. But nature's also not, natural selection is also not survival of the fittest. Because who's the most fit? Is it the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the one with the quickest reflexes, or the best eyesight, or the smartest? No, 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 and no. How do you define who's the most fit in evolutionary terminology? Boom. That's the only thing evolution cares about. That's the only thing. It's about reproduction. Some things thrive in some environments, while the similar things don't thrive in that environment. So the one that thrives should have more offspring. That's a no-brainer. Duh, of course. But that doesn't tell us where things came from. So the fittest is a massive problem. It really should be called differential reproduction. That's another horrible phrase. So we just say natural selection, and everyone gets confused about what the word even means. That's just the nature of languages, and we're stuck with it. But natural selection is not against creation. In fact, I wrote another article on creation.com, Natural Selection in Paradise. I explained that natural selection would have been in effect for fungi and bacteria and maybe insects before Adam even fell into sin. Before death came into the world, there was still environmental change and genetic diversity, which will lead to organismal change. It's not contrary to Scripture. You okay with that? That's controversial, what I just said. In the creation world, there are a lot of us that really do not like natural selection. And I said, no, I'm perfectly comfortable with it. It's actually biblical. Now, let's look at an example of natural selection. This is from our Evolution's Achilles Heels DVD, which is out there. We've got two bacteria. One's mutants, got a tiny little pore. The green food has a hard time getting in, and the purple antibiotic has a hard time getting in. On the left is a normal bacteria, normal pore. The food can get in, and the antibiotic can get in also. Wait a minute. I thought the ability of bacteria to resist antibiotics was an example of evolution. Haven't you heard that? Natural selection in the lab proves evolution. Look at this thing. This natural selection has happened. Yeah, but the defective one is the one that survived. The one that grows slowly. In fact, almost every example of antibiotic resistance I know about in bacteria, and there's a whole bunch of different types, deals with something that's broken. A broken transporter, so the things can't get into the cell, or gene that's always on, so it's always making the antidote for the antibiotic, which means it's wasting tons of energy when the antibiotic is not around. The bacteria don't grow as fast because they're wasting their energy. They're decrepit. And that is the typical example of natural selection that we see. A drive towards decrepitude. Things going downhill. Remember earlier I said it's enough change in the right direction? The examples of natural selection we see go in the wrong direction, almost all of them. Now, there are some issues with in humanity. I do not think that skin color a dark skin color is an adaptation to the tropical areas. Not true. Light skin color, yeah, maybe, because my ancestors at least, they could make enough vitamin D to survive a winter with just a little bit of sun exposure. That's a good thing. But was that natural selection? Or is it just that my ancestral group had a broken, defective MCR1 or maybe the other gene? Yeah, I got a defective gene here. I can't produce enough melanin. And therefore, we were able to move farther north without getting rickets. Did the environment select us, or did we select the environment? Oh, that's hard. That's really hard. Okay, let's put natural selection aside. You notice what I'm doing? I'm just giving you a bunch of illustrations. I'm basically, when I run out of time, I'm going to skip to the end. So here's another illustration. I like this. I call this the two worlds fallacy. Imagine the world of evolution on one side and the world of creation on the other side. Is it true that everything I find that supports evolution disproves creation? Why not? That's how the evolutionists paint it. Well, the answer is no, because both theories are claiming to explain the same territory. There's a huge amount of overlap, which is why natural selection fits in with creation just fine. Okay, Mr. Evolutionist, what else you got? Now we got to go to origin of life. You see, what they tend to do is, it's usually the first page or the first chapter of any college textbook, and the rest of the book ignores evolution entirely. But the first opening section is always, oh, we know evolution is true, and it gives you a bunch of things that are true. And when you see, this is true, 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 and this is true, therefore evolution is true. That is a powerful argument. The problem is, most all of the time, that is what I call non-discriminating information. Because yeah, it's true, and I accept it as part of my model also. If you want to figure out this creation and evolution debate, you have to get out of the area of overlap. You have to get into areas where one theory does not make the prediction. So this is why the creation evolution thing usually boils down to like arguments about the origin of life. Because evolution can't touch that. And you'll see, man, modern evolutionists, they have distanced themselves from what's called chemical evolution. They talked about chemical evolution ever since the 1800s. Charles Darwin wrote about it, his warm little pond analogy. That's Charles Darwin. But now say, oh, no, evolution only applies to living things. That's prebiotic life. No, man, if you don't have a naturalistic way to explain where life came from, what, did aliens do it? Well, some people believe that today. A lot of people believe that today because they realize that life's not going to come up from some warm little pond. So we have to get to the non-discriminating information. Have you ever seen this? The famous Miller-Urey experiment in the 1950s, where they took simple gases, ammonia, methane, water, hydrogen. They mixed it with water, and they boiled the water, ran it through a spark chamber, and then cooled it, and just cycled it for a long time. And what they're trying to do was show that even under simple conditions, like conditions you might assume were in the early earth before life came about, that you can get biological molecules. You can get all the building blocks of life. And once you have the building blocks of life, life is easy. No, you just did the most simplest thing. What they showed was that random chemical reactions make random chemicals. That's what they showed. Yeah, they got a couple of amino acids. That's true. But most of the amino acids they didn't get because they're too complicated. They don't form under those conditions. And yeah, they might have gotten a little bit of alanine, fine, but it was lost in a sea of other random chemicals. Life is not random chemicals. Life is, in fact, living things do things that we can't do in the laboratory. They do things one molecule at a time with scissor-like perfection. It is unbelievable what living things can do. They can take a molecule and just stick a hydrogen on it. Oh, no, I'm going to rip off the hydrogen and stick a carbon on it. One. We cannot do that. Our chemistry is dirty mass action chemistry that never runs to 100% completion, ever. And life does it exactly. And in fact, if life were dirty, we'd all be dead. Because our bodies are too fine-tuned. The living cell is so incredibly fine-tuned. If it gets off just a little bit, usually the cell dies. And a lot of potential byproducts of biological reactions are absolutely toxic. I mean, you make formaldehyde. Did you know that you produce formaldehyde? You produce lots of formaldehyde, and your body instantly changes to something else so that you don't die. So the origin of life has got a massive problem. They can't explain where most organic molecules come from, let alone complex organic molecules. Worse than that, we are made of long chains called polymers, long chains of complex organic molecules. We're made of nucleotides strung out, which makes RNA and DNA, amino acids strung out, which makes proteins, and sugars strung out, which makes carbohydrates. The funny thing is that if you add any of those things to water, water breaks them down. You can take amino acids in a jug, or nucleotides in a beaker, or sugars in a cup, and let them sit for millions of years, and they're never going to form long chain molecules. Because yeah, you can get two sugars bump into each other and make a covalent bond. That's true. But water breaks those bonds faster than they form. So you add sugar to water, wait a long time, take all the sugar out, and look for sugars that are linked together. You'll find like 1 out of a trillion or a dimer. You might find one in a big, big flask that's a trimer. Maybe. How do you get life started if life needs long molecules when long molecules don't come out of random chemistry? But it's even worse than that. There are specific things in your body that if it wasn't for an enzyme, this chemical reaction would take longer than the age of the universe in the Big Bang model to happen. And you have enzymes that take this improbable chemical reaction and they speed it up like a trillion-fold. And that way, you have this necessary thing in your body that could never come about otherwise. Without those enzymes, you can't live. The reaction rates are too slow. But it's worse than that. Absolutely worse than that. I remember when we were filming Evolution's Achilles' Heels, we had Dr. John Sanford on camera. And he said something that made me really uncomfortable. And I stopped him. I said, "John?" He goes, "No, just wait. Let me get to the end." Okay, do it again. And he said this. He said something like, "I'll give evolutionists everything they want. I will give them all the organic molecules they want. I will give them cells that are packed with organic molecules. I'll give them proteins. I'll give them nucleotides. I'll give them carbohydrates. I'll give them a cell membrane. I'll give them anything they want. I'll even give them billions of years." And they're still never going to get evolution. Because life requires information. It requires information. It requires information. Lots of it. It's an instruction set. You are essentially an information processing machine. Your cells are making decisions constantly. And without an information set, you don't get life. Okay, let's talk about the computer again. Right? There's some version of Windows installed on this computer. There's a hard drive here. I guess it's a SSD now, so it's not a hard drive anymore. There's a giant computer chip with ones and zeros on it. Okay. Is that random? This machine is nothing like the simplest possible cell. The simplest possible cell is much more complex than this, because you know what? What the thing can't do that a cell can do, this thing can't reproduce. And yet, the code that's controlling this thing has taken, I don't know, 1 billion man hours and woman hours, because we're all beta testers, right? It's not like the Microsoft engineers just coded us. No, they had to try it on us. We helped them make the thing. Millions upon millions upon millions of hours of work to get something that hardly even works. It drives me nuts, this thing is so dumb. And it's nothing compared to the simplest cell. How does that make you feel? Yeah, you're made of dust. True. Yeah, your atoms are really far apart. You're a hologram. And yet, you are amazingly made, shockingly made, beautifully made. Because you're made by a God who loves you, who made you for a purpose. You're not a blot or an accident. You're not just random stardust who collected for a little while. No, you were made for a purpose. Your purpose is to glorify Him. And whether you believe in Him or not, you're still going to glorify Him. A lot more information. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I thought I was at the end. I'm not. Good, I got 10 minutes. Okay, 1 or 2 more illustrations, then we can relax. I wanted you to think of the smallest thing that you can see. Maybe there's a speck of dust floating in the light. The smallest thing you can see. Now think of the biggest thing you can see, and you know how big it is. You don't know how big the sun is. We didn't know how big the sun was until the 1700s. You don't know how big the moon is. You probably know how big your house is. Wherever you live, maybe you've lived there long enough, you've been to every nook and cranny. You probably draw it on a piece of paper. If I blindfolded you, say, okay, go into the master bedroom and go over to the closet. You could probably get there. You might bump your shin on something, but you could get there, right? Do you know how big your neighborhood is? Probably not. So you're limited in how large and small you can know something is. Okay, think of the shortest time period that you can notice. Maybe the blink of an eye. Not really anything faster than that. Okay, what's the longest time period that you can notice? Well, something that happened over the course of your life, maybe. So maybe when you were born, or maybe when you're like 5 years old, so you remember it, your dad planted an apple tree in the front yard, and you've been watching this tree grow your entire life. That's it. You cannot know any more than that. So we have a zone of direct observation. It's limited in size and it's limited in time. Now, we've invented machines like atomic clocks and telescopes and microscopes that have allowed us to expand that zone of direct observation into the realm of instrumentation. This is really cool stuff. But notice on the left side, there's a problem. In that time, when all of human experiences together are combined, they peter out just a few thousand years ago. History does not go back before the 3rd century BC. In fact, the early 3rd century BC. Why? Because that's when civilizations were getting reestablished after Noah's flood. No history goes before that. 0. So when we're talking about evolution, we're talking about things humans cannot possibly know. And outside of this is just the zone of deduction, lucky guesses, experiments, hypotheses. You cannot actually know how old the universe is according to science. The smallest thing in the universe according to science, the biggest thing, the fastest or the longest, you can't know. Science is blind. And scientists want to prove that there is no God? All right, one more illustration. You've heard time described as a line, right? The arrow, or as an arrow, the arrow of time. Okay? Look at Isaiah 46:10. God speaking. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. So if God knows the end from the beginning, he's not stuck in time. Right? Remember when Christ went across the sea and met the man who was cutting himself in the tombs, and the demon said, what have you to do with us, Son of God? Have you come to torment us before our time? Yeah, even angels and devils are trapped in time. They're on this linear time. God is not. God is outside of time. But if I was God and I was outside of time and I want to look at time, here's the beginning, there's the end. Maybe you go backwards. It gets smaller. I still have to do this unless I'm infinitely far away. You have to go infinitely far away for time to reduce to something really small. That doesn't make much sense. But what if God, as a hyperdimensional being, too bad. All right, this is the skinniest thing I have. What if this is the hour of time and God is a hyperdimensional being, just like I can take this three-dimensional object and rotate it in the fourth dimension time? What if you could take the four-dimensional thing and do this? Then time reduces to a point. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I like thinking of it this way. To God, time's all the same. This is why he knows what's going to happen. He's already seen it. It's already in his mind. He's already been there. There are no surprises for God. So salvation was not plan B. It was not an accident. Now, why did God set up the universe knowing it was going to fail? That's a very awkward question, but we have a DVD on our tables that answers why did God allow bad things to happen. It's right there. But I do know that in allowing this to happen, God allowed, let's say it this way. Why did God create the universe? Did God need to create the universe? No, God needs nothing. Okay. Now, in creating the universe, he did glorify himself, okay. And he was able to express more parts of his nature than he could have if he hadn't have created the universe. He could love something unlovable. He loves himself, that makes sense. He is lovable. I'm not, and yet he loves me anyway. So he's able to express more parts of his nature, which is really cool. But what if God created the universe in order to bring about a bride for his son? Because we sure seem to be in a very important place in the universe. I mean, God is thinking of us. What? God sent his son down to die for us. What? I'm just dust. And yet, yeah, there's a very important place in, oh man, I got so much more to do. All right, I'm going to skip ahead here. Psalm 139:14. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Hey, let me ask you a question. Does your soul know it very well? After all that was said tonight, do you know that you're fearfully and wonderfully made? By whom? Look at John chapter 1. In the beginning, interesting, that's the opening word of the book of Genesis in Greek. In the beginning was something called the Word. Okay, and his Word was with God. Oh, the Word was God. Okay, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Of course, God's not made, right? So anything made that was made. And then later on in verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That means that Jesus is the creator of the universe. The Word created the universe, the Word became flesh. When we are bringing up alternate versions of history, like evolutionary history, we're actually attacking the character and nature of Jesus Christ himself. That's why this is not a neutral proposition. So I'll leave you with Hebrews chapter 2. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, it's talking about heaven or hell there, How shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? And once you start turning to the God of the Bible and the God of creation, our excuses fall away. My goal here was to encourage some of you Christians that needed encouraging. Maybe to excite some of you Christians that aren't really wavering at the moment, you just want to learn a little more science, but also to challenge some of you, because I don't know what your spiritual state is, but anytime I'm speaking to an audience, I'm guaranteeing there's someone doesn't believe what I'm saying. I challenge you right now. You're facing this God of creation, the only logical conclusion that there is a God of creation. And if that's true, then we're accountable to him. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. It's supposed to. Turn to him and do it now. All right. Man, I didn't know I was going to philosophize and sermonize so much. If you go out in the tables here, there's some really cool stuff. We have Creation Magazine out there, which we'll talk about in the next session. There is, next session, there we go. Creation Answers book. If you are new to this and you don't know where to go, that book's going to answer almost every question. We wrote it to answer almost every question. And what about carbon dating? What about dinosaurs? How'd starlight get here from outer space? Is there life in outer space? All those questions answered in one book. We've got a great pack. It's called the Starter Pack. Comes with a great discount. It's a Creation Answers book. Then Refuting Evolution, which is the best-selling creation evolution book ever written. And not this DVD. There's another DVD we just put into it that's out there on the tables. Here's Evolution's Achilles Heels, the book and the documentary. If you like to read, if you like to watch movies, pick one. You can also stream the documentary off of our website, because I know a lot of people don't have DVD players anymore. Biblical Geology 101, great book. Biblical Biology 101 is also out there. I know we have sold one already. That was you, right? No? Oh, boy. Where is it? I know. Thank you, lady that I talked to before. There you are. Thank you. Sorry, you're farther away. You're kind of blurry. Biblical Biology 101, awesome book. I don't think we have this one. The Genesis Academy, 12-part series on the first 11 chapters of Genesis. By the way, I can sign that book for you if you want. Just saying. 12 parts on the first 11 chapters of Genesis. We actually build a sound studio in our warehouse to film this professionally. It's one of the most amazing things that we've done. It was years of work, and it's out there. It's on the tables. Here's kids' books, Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb, Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb. Got some other kids' books. Here's a dinosaur book, big, fat book. Anything you want to know about dinosaurs, from a creation perspective, we put it into one book, Titans of the Earth, Sea, and Air. It's a really cool book. We've got things, again, streaming off our website. If you just go to creation.com, go to store, you can find this, not too hard to find, the streaming site. This one, The Historical Atom, Theological Conundrums and Scientific Implications. It's me, the geneticist, saying 7 reasons to believe in the biblical atom, most of them through genetics. Again, creation.com is there for you. Okay, I got 1 minute to stop. I'm going to leave you with 1 Peter 3:15. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. You do it with gentleness and respect. I tried to reflect that. It's really hard. My Irish temper flares up when someone insults me. It really does. I want to pop them in the nose. But I'm not allowed to. I'm supposed to be following the example that Christ set. Here Peter's doing that too. So we can do this. We can engage the world. We don't have to be jerks about it because the truth is on our side. It just takes time. And you just took an hour. You just sat here for an hour, and I machine gunned you with all this stuff, and hopefully just a little bit more encouraged. You okay? All right, we're going to come back in 15 minutes for the second session. I hope you stay for it because it's going to be fun, one of my favorite ones ever. I keep saying that, but it's true. All right, thank you. Do we have to say anything to close? Oh, he's got the microphone. Okay.
Nah, so like Dr. Carter said, we'll be back in about 15 minutes. Please check out the snack table in the back. It all goes to the youth group, and also we have the tables outside if you want to check out any materials. Thanks.